All right, so we're ready to jump into a deep dive here. This one's about excavation safety, specifically OSHA standard 1926.652. All about keeping those trenches safe and sound, straight from the OSHA standard itself. And huge thanks to Safety One Source for making this happen. I think a lot of our listeners are pretty familiar with this stuff already, working in the field and all. But even if you think you know it all, I bet we can still dig up some interesting stuff today. We're going to really unearth those key things, the things you got to know to protect workers from cave-ins.
Yeah, you're right. It's so easy to get caught up in the day to day. Sometimes you got to step back and look at the details, the nuances of a standard like this.
Exactly. So let's start with 1926.652A, protection of employees in excavations. Sounds kind of basic, right? Like protect everyone in an excavation, but it actually gets a little tricky with some exceptions.
Yeah, those exceptions are really important because they force you to think critically. You got to have real expertise on site to make the right call.
Right on. So one exception is if the excavation is totally unstable rock. But hold on, what does OSHA even mean by stable rock? It can't be just any old rock, right?
That's a great question, and it's exactly where the competent person comes in. That term, competent person, OSHA doesn't just throw that around. This person needs the training, the experience to look at the soil and say, yeah, this is stable rock, or nope, this isn't. We're talking about things like, how strong the rock is, if there are cracks, the overall, how solid the rock is, really.
Wow. So it's way more than just, glancing at it. And this competent person is also important for the second exception for excavations less than 5 feet deep. But there's a catch, right? It's only if a competent person has checked it out and they don't see any chance of a cave-in. So even a shallow ditch could be dangerous if the soil's not stable.
Absolutely. And then there's 1926.652A2, which says that any protective system you use, it has to be strong enough for not just the loads you expect, but also any unexpected loads too. So that's where the engineers come in with their calculations and all that.
Definitely. So. Can't just wing it and hope for the best. Safety needs a real solid data-driven approach. Okay, so let's move on to 1926.652B now. Design of sloping and benching systems. This one gives us 4 ways to design a safe excavation, and they range from pretty simple to let's just say you might want an engineer's number handy.
Yeah, it's like choosing your own adventure, but for excavation safety.
I like that. Okay, so option 1, that's the easiest one. Slope the excavation no steeper than 1.5 horizontal to 1 vertical, which is about 34 degrees. And this connects back to soil type, something we talked about earlier, Appendix B of the standard. It gets into all the nitty-gritty of how they classify soil, specifically Type C soil. Okay. I'm thinking maybe we should do a deep dive on those appendices sometime.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Those appendices are a whole world unto themselves.
Sure. All right, back to the options. So options 2, 3, and 4, those are a little more complicated, might need an engineer. Option 2 uses appendices A and B for more complex slope and benching calculations. Option 3, you can use other data that's already been pre-approved, like charts or tables. And option 4, that's the custom design route. You get an engineer to create a solution for really unique situations.
And what's really interesting is that no matter which option you choose, you got to have good documentation. You need written plans, engineer approvals, the whole shebang, and all of it needs to be readily available on the site.
Makes sense, right? In an emergency, you don't want to be scrambling for paperwork. Speaking of different approaches, we got to talk about 1926.652C, design of support systems, shield systems, and other protective systems. And guess what? It's set up just like the sloping and benching section with 4 options.
Yeah, OSHA really likes that format. It gives you flexibility while still keeping things safe.
Exactly. Option 1, we can use appendices A, C, and D for specific designs like timber shoring in trenches. Appendix C is the go-to for that. Option 2, we can use the manufacturer's data, which is common for those pre-made trench shields. Option 3, other pre-approved data, like charts and stuff. And finally, option 4, that's our custom design solution, which needs, you guessed it, an engineer's stamp of approval.
It's interesting how much they emphasize the engineer in those more complex scenarios. It's like a built-in safety check, making sure everything's done right.
Yeah, it's definitely not just putting up some supports and hoping for the best. And just like with sloping and benching, you got to have that documentation for the support systems and shields too. Plans, approvals, got to have them ready. Now, 1926.6522 day, this one's all about materials and equipment, making sure you're using the right tools for the job and that those tools are in good shape.
Right. You can't be using damaged equipment. That's just asking for trouble. So the standard says, use undamaged materials that are actually right for the job. And of course, the manufacturer's recommendations, those are essential.
Absolutely. If something gets damaged, got to pull it right away.
Right.
No excuses. A competent person has to look at the damage, and if they can't say for sure it's safe, then an engineer needs to okay it before it's used again.
Yeah, it all comes back to that core idea of worker safety. Every decision, every action, has to keep that in mind.
All right, let's move on to 1926.652E, installation and removal of support. This one's got a lot of important safety points, so we'll just hit the main ones.
Yeah, let's focus on the really critical stuff, the things that can make a big difference.
First up, connections got to be secure, and you need safe procedures for putting up and taking down support systems. And it might seem obvious, but you got to protect workers from falling objects during all that. Then when you're taking down support systems, got to release the load slowly, no sudden movements. And backfilling, that happens while you're removing the supports, not after.
All great points. And if you're working in specifically in trenches, there's 1926.652E. That's got some extra stuff you'll want to know.
Okay, on to 1926.652F, sloping and benching systems. This one's short and sweet, but it talks about a big danger. Working on a sloped or benched excavation, and there's other workers below you.
Yeah, that's a situation where things can go bad really quickly if you're not careful. Imagine, tools or even equipment falling from above.
Not a good thought. The standard's very clear. Those workers below need to be protected from falling things. And that brings us to our last section for this part, 1926.652 shield systems.
Shield systems, those pre-made structures they use a lot in trenches, they're great, but they're not perfect. So this section talks about, what they're for and what they can't do.
Right. So it says that shields have to be designed to handle the loads they're meant for. No cutting corners there. They also have to be installed the right way to prevent any dangerous movement. And even with the shield in place, worker safety is still super important. So the standard says employees need protection when they're going in and out of shielded areas.
And maybe most importantly, nobody's allowed inside a shield when it's being installed, removed, or moved up or down. That's a hard and fast rule for safety.
So we've covered a lot here in part one, from general requirements to specific protective systems.
But we're just getting started. There's a lot more to dig into in this standard, especially those appendices. We've got to talk about those more.
Definitely. Stay tuned for part two, where we'll dive deep into soil classification and those appendices and see how they really help us design safe excavations.
Welcome back. Ready to tackle those appendices.
You bet. We kept mentioning soil classification and appendices A and B, so I think it's time to really dig into those.
All right. So Appendix A, it's called soil classification. And it's really the foundation for understanding, how different soils behave in excavations. We're talking about, cohesive soils like clay, granular soils like sand, and the systems they use to classify them.
So this is where we figure out what kind of dirt we're dealing with.
Yeah.
It's pretty important.
Oh, absolutely. It's the first step to choosing the right protective system, and that's where Appendix B comes in. It's called sloping and benching, and it gives you specific requirements based on, you guessed it, soil type. Remember those 4 options for designing a safe excavation. If you're using options 1 or 2, you'll be using Appendix B a lot.
Okay, so let me see if I got this right. If I'm using that simple sloping method, option 1, first I got to figure out what type of soil I have using Appendix A. Then I go to Appendix B to find the steepest slope I can have for that soil type.
Exactly, you got it. And Appendix B isn't just about simple slopes. It also talks about benching systems. Those stepped excavations with levels. It gives you guidelines for designing those benches safely, all based on soil type again.
Appendices A and B sound like like must reads for anyone doing excavation work, especially those competent persons, the ones making the important decisions?
Couldn't agree more. It's not just about following the rules. It's about understanding why those rules exist. These appendices, they help you really grasp those soil mechanics principles so you can make smart decisions to keep workers safe.
Speaking of important appendices, what about Appendix C? That one came up when we were talking about timber shoring.
Right. Appendix C, that's our guide to timber shoring for trenches.
Yeah.
It's like a step-by-step manual covering everything about those shoring boxes, the type of timber, how to build them, all of that.
So if I have a trench that needs support, I'm going with timber shoring. Appendix C is my new best friend.
Exactly. It'll make sure those timber shoring systems are designed and installed the right way.
And then there's Appendix D. That one popped up when we talked about aluminum hydraulic shoring.
Yep. Appendix D is all about aluminum hydraulic shoring for trenches. That type of shoring, it's getting more popular because it's versatile, pretty easy to use. But still gotta plan and do things carefully.
So Appendix D would be my guide if I chose aluminum hydraulic shoring.
Exactly. It gives you those those crucial specifications and guidelines to make sure you're using that type of shoring safely and effectively. Even with these pre-engineered systems, you still need a competent person.
Yeah.
They got to look at the site, make sure the system is right for the soil and everything, and make sure it's installed according to the manufacturer's instructions.
Right. So we've got appendices A, B, C, and D covered. They might seem kind of intimidating at first, but they're really they're there to help us. To give us all the detailed guidance we need to put those safety principles into action.
Yeah, I like that. They're like tools to help you build a strong foundation for safety.
Going through these appendices, I'm noticing a theme here: competence. Whether it's the competent person checking the soil, or the engineer designing a complex support system, having qualified people involved all the way through seems really important.
Absolutely, that's the key. Having the right people with the right knowledge in the right place at the right time. That's what prevents those terrible accidents.
Yeah, that's a powerful message.
Yeah.
And a good way to transition to part 3. We've talked about the nuts and bolts of OSHA 1926.652, but what does it all really mean? How does it fit into the bigger picture of safety? Back again for part 3, we spent the last 2 parts going through OSHA 1926.652, and I think it's clear that excavation safety, it's not as simple as it might seem at first.
Yeah, there's a lot to it. And those appendices, those add a whole other layer for sure.
We've covered soil types, the different protective systems, the engineering stuff, the competent person. It's all connected.
Right, and that's the whole point, really. 1926.652. It's not just some random rules. It's part of something bigger, creating a real safety culture.
Okay, so how does the standard fit into that bigger picture? What are the big takeaways for our listeners, especially the folks responsible for safety?
Well, I think the first big takeaway is planning ahead. Excavation safety, it doesn't start when the excavator shows up. It starts way before that with a good hazard assessment, figuring out the risks, and then creating a safety plan that's specific to that project.
Right, and that plan needs to be built on a solid foundation. Right, got to have that deep understanding of the OSHA standard, those appendices we talked about, and the best practices in the industry.
Exactly, and we can't forget about the human side of things, communication. Everyone involved in the excavation, from the project manager to the workers, in the trench, everyone needs to be on the same page, sharing information, knowing their role in keeping things safe. So things like toolbox talks, safety briefings, having open communication, those are essential.
Yeah, that's important. Safety is not just a bunch of rules from the top down. It's got to be everyone working together. Being informed, engaged, and feeling like they can speak up if something seems unsafe.
What's interesting is that 1926.652 also kind of subtly pushes you towards continuous improvement. It's not enough to just have a plan. Conditions can change fast in an excavation. So a good safety culture, it means you're always watching, always identifying hazards, and adjusting the plan when you need to.
So you got to be flexible, able to to adapt to the situation.
Exactly. And that flexibility, you see it in the standard too, with the different
Ah.
protective systems. You have those 4 options for sloping and benching, 4 options for support systems. It recognizes that, one size doesn't fit all.
Which brings up a good question for our listeners. How can they go beyond just knowing the OSHA standards? How can they actually create that proactive, adaptable safety culture in their workplaces?
Well, there are a few things they can do. One is to look for more training. Organizations like NUCA, the National Utility Contractors Association, and ASCE, the American Society of Civil Engineers, they have some great training programs specifically on excavation safety.
And of course, we got to mention Safety One Source. Their video was the inspiration for this whole deep dive.
Absolutely. Their YouTube channel is it's fantastic. Tons of information on all kinds of safety topics, presented in a way that's easy to understand and engaging. And beyond formal training, there's a lot of value in networking, sharing knowledge with other people. Connecting with other safety professionals, going to conferences, keeping up with the latest best practices. All that can really help you understand and implement good safety measures.
So it's about building a community, supporting each other and sharing knowledge about excavation safety.
Exactly, because in the end, it's all about protecting people, making sure every worker goes home safe at the end of the day.
Well said. We've covered a lot in this deep dive, from the technical details of the OSHA standard to the bigger cultural side of workplace safety.
It's been a good journey,
Yeah.
exploring the standard and finding those little nuggets of knowledge that can really help prevent accidents.
And as we wrap up, we want to leave you with one final thought, a challenge, really. How can you take what you've learned today and use it in your own workplace? Think about the specific challenges you face, the resources you have, the steps you can take to create a safer environment for yourself and everyone around you.
Remember, safety, it's not just about checking boxes. It's an ongoing thing, always striving to do better, be better, stay curious, stay engaged, and keep digging deeper.